Great, thanks, Alex. And wow, isn't it great that we can all get together today just before World Mental Health Awareness Day, which is fantastic, on Sunday, to be able to do this work together on practicing a mental health MOT. And we do have the Q&A function, so I really enjoy it when we have loads of participation, although it can be challenging to keep up with everyone's comments. So feel free to share any tips, anything you want to share to support today's session in the Q&A for us. That would be great, and we'll keep a track on those as they go through. So what's today really about? What's this MOT? So this is really about being able to encourage you to practice today and ask yourself some questions. And we've got some fantastic resources available on the website. So the MOT itself, all of the questions and some additional resources are going to be available on the website or are available on the website. I'd also encourage you to grab a pen and piece of paper because we are going to do some reflection as well throughout the session. So that can be really, really handy. So we will signpost you to the website for these resources, and I guess it makes sense to do some introductions now so you can meet our fantastic panel for today. So I'm Emma Tomes. I work as a grief recovery specialist, so working with people that have experienced some form of loss, and I'm also a mental health first aid instructor member. I'm also a mum, so I have 2 boys and 3 dogs, and one of the things that I love to do is practice mindfulness because it's helped me so much. I can think differently to others as well, so I'm also dyslexic, so makes sense to go over to you next, Mike.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, so I was asked to put a few labels up. Obviously, none of us really like labels, do we, really, if we're honest? But it does give people a flavour of who we're speaking to and who we're talking with. So yes, I'm a proud owner of a rescued rabbit. Rabbit came from a pupil referral unit, had a bit of a hard life, too many babies. So I'm now looking after her, and her name is Socks, and she's 5. Don't know what that is in rabbit years, but I think she's fairly middle-aged, so she's okay. I'm a father also of some other hairy creatures, my son and my daughter, and I won't say their names in case they ever have to listen to this. So DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, I do some work on that, and perhaps we'll talk about that, this being Black History Month and the theme of World Mental Health Day being mental health in an unequal world. I'm sure we'll touch on that later on, but also AED, and I put that in as a bit of a sort of test, automated external defibrillator. So I do physical first aid as well as mental health first aid. Thanks.
Thank you. And we also have Emma as well with us.
Thank you. Prerequisite is there has to be at least 2 Emmas involved in any webinar at Mental Health First Aid England. So my name's Emma. I'm Head of Innovation at Mental Health First Aid England. I'm a dog mum, so I've got a lovely doggy called Jeffrey, who is a Labrador. I am an avid gardener, so I started volunteering during lockdown at local community gardens. And I really like being outdoors. I've just started taking up paddle boarding. I'm not very good, but you know, I'm trying. And I like reading lots of books, and normally I'm found at a weekend trying to finish a book in the day. So that's me.
Impressive stuff. Fab. So what are we going to do for this next hour? Well, what we've got left. So we're going to do some polls with you. So as I mentioned earlier, interaction is great, isn't it? It really helps us to feel connected to one another. So we really want your interaction today. So we're going to do some polls. We're going to get you thinking about some questions that are involved in the mental health MOT. So we're going to get you thinking about your mental health, your thinking. We'll also introduce you to the stress container and how are you looking after yourself. And again, we'll give you an overview of some of the resources that we've pulled out for you today that we think are really going to help with this as well. There's always an opportunity to ask questions. Whether you want to do that throughout the session and pop those in the Q&A, so we've got some that we can refer to, or whether you want to share those with us at the end of the session, we'll look at those. Okay, so makes sense for us to start with our first poll. So So we're gonna share this poll with you now. And we really want you to think, how often do you really take the time to do a check-in on your mental health? So really making that time and space to be able to do that. So have a go at answering our poll. Panelists, how often do you do this?
Go, Mike.
Yeah, so for me, I try and do this weekly. It's something I sort of sit down normally at a certain time on a Sunday, and I think to myself, how has it gone? How are things going? And I look at my calendar and realise, oh, I've got so much left to do to prepare for Monday. I better get on with things. So I'm not the best.
Weekly is great though. The fact you've got that discipline to do it so regularly, you know, the day, you kind of know sort of the way in which you do it, I think is really great. I try and do it on a walk, normally on a long walk with Jeff the dog. I'd love to do it daily. I think it would make such a difference, but I haven't built it in enough into my routine to do it that often.
Do find sometimes it's good to do with another person as well, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we've got the results that have come through. So yes, we've got weekly 23% of our attendees, and yeah, we've got 4% for never. So let's see if we can try and change that after today, right? Great. Okay. So before we get started, we've got another poll for you. This is around confidence. So do you know what you're doing? Do you feel confident in knowing what you're doing to check in on your own mental health, but also with those of others as well? And I know some days I feel more confident and comfortable than others. What about our panelists? What are your thoughts?
I agree. I think if my own mental health isn't great, then it can be tricky to extend the curiosity to others. And I think there's also a difference in maybe my confidence in talking to a partner, asking how they are, versus a colleague, versus a family member. So I think maybe the relationship can change the confidence around either sharing yourself or asking how they are. I don't know, what do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I must admit, I'm very much better at talking to other people about their mental health than myself, which is kind of odd, isn't it? But I guess I've been training for a few years now, and it comes quite naturally to open the conversation. But for myself, I'd usually have to have something that bumps me, that goes, oi, do you realise that you're still working? It's 8 p.m. Now. What's that doing to my mental health? So sometimes I need that external stimulus, if you like. But talk to other people, you sort of get into a vein, don't you, where it's more comfortable the more you do it.
So what I'm hearing there is like practice, which is great that we're getting together today to have a go. So we've got 50% of our attendees are saying somewhat confident. So it looks like there's some work we can do there today. So building your confidence today through some of the questions and some of the reflection that we're going to do. Okay. So as with anything, we just need to check that we're in the right state, in the right headspace to be able to start something like this. So before we begin, let's take a moment together. And I just want to do a really simple mindfulness practice that has really helped me. So I mentioned earlier that I really do enjoy mindfulness practice, and a lot of that is based on my own lived experience with mental health. So what I'd like to do, there's an invitation to join me in this. And if this is okay, Emma and Mike, feel free to join along. Is just get comfortable in your chair. So have a little wiggle, get comfy in your chair right now. And if you can, place your feet just flat on the floor, okay? And just take a moment to notice how that feels. And now what I'd like to do is to ask you to just notice your breathing. So you don't need to change your breathing in any way. All you need to do is just notice it. And then I'll just invite you to come back to the room and just share your thoughts around what you noticed. What were the differences? So whether you want to share your thoughts in the Q&A, feel free. When we'll come over to Mike and Emma, what was that like, taking that time out to really notice your own breathing?
I've just noticed the most wonderful red flower out through the window that's been there for weeks and weeks. And I never actually had a chance to look at it properly. So yeah, I'm very much more, that moment, I'm very much more aware of what was going on around me.
Thank you, Mike.
That's so nice. I feel quite calm for something that took no time at all. I think there's this idea that to create a kind of space where you feel calmer or more relaxed, you need to dedicate half an hour to it, and then you'll achieve it. And actually in a couple of minutes you can feel much more sort of centered and able to have a bit more clarity. And that, I think I probably don't recognize the difference things like that can make, just sharp focuses, because it's definitely, I can really feel it like in my body as well as mentally. So thank you for running it. It was great.
That's okay. It certainly helped me as as chairing this session, just to ground myself into the session. So it's great to hear the feedback, and we've had some really great comments coming through in the chat as well. So you know, talking about definitely feeling calmer, noticing our heartbeat, noticing our heart rate, noticing what a beautiful day it is. We've got some fantastic comments coming through the Q&A. And picking up on your point there, Emma, you know, where have I used this? The great thing is that you can do this once you sort of know that all it is focusing on your breathing. You can use it before perhaps a meeting, or I've used it before the dentist. So those points in our lives where we think we might just need to take a moment is a really helpful exercise. So really pleased to be able to share that with everyone. So what the intention is that we're now in a really good headspace to really do this my whole self MOT. So we're in a good environment, we're in a good headspace to be able to really reflect. So what we're essentially going to do today is just break down this my whole self MOT. Okay, like anything, you know, breaking it down into smaller steps makes it feel less overwhelming. So that's what we're going to do today. All right. So the first step then is we really want you to ask yourself, how is your mental health today? So considering these questions, how do I feel today? How do I feel physically? How do I feel mentally? And how has that changed over the course of the day? So thinking about, I mean, I know it's only what, 1:20, but this morning feels like a long time ago now. So thinking about how has that changed over the course of the day? What are your approaches on these ones, Emma and Mike? How do you feel about asking yourself these questions?
I think for me, it's very much, I'm kind of doing it pretty much all the time, but it is good to actually stop, just like we've done there in that little bit of breath work, just to take that moment to bring things together. I have arthritis in my hip and my knee on my right hand side, so sometimes I have to be a bit careful of how much I do physically. And that can impact obviously on the way I feel about things and the way I look at the rest of my day. And you know, it can be a challenge sometimes if you've got a little bit of negative thinking coming in, because you know you've got a physical pain and you can't get out as much as you would like to. So the two, all the things interact with each other, don't they? And there's that circadian rhythm that we sort of aware of. Our rhythm is slightly different depending on who we are. But yeah, we just need to be noticeable of ourselves, don't we?
Just want to catch a comment that's come through there for you, Mike. So we've got Rachel saying, I agree with Mike. I guess I don't normally even think about things. My mind is so busy with other things, but to take the moment just to be present in the moment. So there you go. Fantastic. It's great to have these contributions coming through in the Q&A. Emma, what about your approach for this one?
I think it encourages me, if I ask myself these questions, to be honest, as opposed to if someone asks me, how are you doing? And I go, yeah, I'm great, or I'm okay. It sort of encourages me to go, actually, how do you feel today? And what does that mean in terms of how you feel physically, how you feel mentally, and what do you need in order to either, you know, kind of move up the scale or whatever it is that I'm thinking about. So I think it's quite good at forcing me to be quite honest about things, because it's quite easy to push things aside. So like today, I'm incredibly tired. I get to a Friday, and particularly now that the world's opened up again, and I went into the office yesterday and it was great, but it's so tiring. How did we commute every day? I just don't know how I did it. And it, you know, just the stimulation of being around lots of people and having lots of conversations is great, but it's really tiring, and I have to make sure that I take care of myself the next day, and that, you know, I'm ensuring that I'm able to rebuild my resilience back up again, even from really good things. So yeah, I think asking those questions and being really honest about it and being quite tactical is important.
Yeah, and I think another really great point that came through as you were talking there, Emma, is like this compassion towards ourselves as well, you know, that being compassionate about these changes that you know, going into the office more, and you know what that involves, and being compassionate with ourselves when we are feeling tired, and knowing that that's okay. It's just what can we do about it? What can we do to feel better? And you mentioned scaling there, which I think is a really good way of avoiding kind of all or nothing thinking as well. So looking at, and we did it with the poll, didn't we? We were kind of like, rate yourself on the poll. And by doing that as part of your weekly check-in, we can notice differences. We can start to see what's working, what's not working, which is really great. Okay, so we talked about the feelings there. Let's move into the next section on our MOT. So this is all really around how is my thinking, and we've got a really great snippet from a podcast, from our podcast with Simon, our CEO, and Ruby Wax. So we're just going to play that one for you now.
But the thing is, we are not just our thoughts, and then I have to explain that your thoughts are 1% of the 99% that's running you. So you don't know when you're swallowing and what happens to that food on its way down. You don't know when your heart is beating, or you're about to get, have a fit. You just don't know. All you're thinking about is your shopping list, really. You're thinking, I got to do this, I have to do this, based on these bodily sensations. So later in the show, I say I can't really tell the difference when I'm in love and when I have indigestion. They feel the same. So your thoughts are always interpreting this gigantic kind of huge cosmos living under your neck. So thoughts are kind of tiny. And that's, I guess, another thing to get your head around is they may be wrong. Yeah. They aren't who you are. They may be wrong.
I might talk to my husband tonight about whether I've had indigestion for the last 15 years or whether it's love.
Oh, such a great podcast there. Really talking about how important it is that we, really reflect on our thoughts and our feelings. And there's a great mindfulness meditation, which is all around almost visualizing having a workbench where you place all of your thoughts and feelings out on this workplace to really kind of think about, are they helpful? What's happening for me right now? And it just got me thinking, how do we do that? So any advice or tips from our panel around really thinking and reflecting on how our thoughts are making us feel?
I think for me, I try and analyze my self-talk and assess whether I would say that to anybody else. So would I say this to a friend? And therefore, what could I say in response? And almost try and have a conversation with what's going on in my head, just to try and level things out. It's almost like the rational, and almost what you were describing around that compassion. Really having compassion for yourself. But I'll often, when I'm having a day where I know I can hear that I'm being incredibly critical to myself and I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'll sit down and go, right, okay, what are we saying here? What's going on? And almost write it out and then think about, okay, what does this actually mean? What do we need to do for ourselves? How can we be kind? And that has really helped since doing that, probably over the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, as you were saying that, we had a comment coming through in the Q&A, which was sometimes if we can kind of get into this whirlpool, so running the risk of heading into a negative whirlpool of thinking. So, and how do we pull ourselves back from that? And I think what you were saying there, Emma, is, would I say this kind of thing to a good friend? But also the other thing is being able to reach out and knowing who have you got that can reach out, to try and think about your thoughts and to be able to talk those through. And there's an old colleague of mine, and I always remember her saying to me, but is that fact or is that a thought? And it was a really great way of kind of helping me to rein or to observe, do that workbench of really analysing my thoughts and creating some distance there. So I hope that helps the person that we just had that question come through. So thank you. All right, so some work that we can do there. The next part of our MOT is, am I looking after myself? So we know there is this connection between our physical health and also our mental well-being. So asking ourselves these questions, how did I sleep last night? Am I eating a balanced diet? And am I dehydrated? This is going to help us to connect up, to really think about what are we doing that's helpful and unhelpful, right? So Emma, you were mentioning about being tired. So this would be a great question to ask you right now, if you're happy to answer. How did you sleep last night?
I actually slept incredibly well. I think I've overdone it this week and I'm mentally fatigued. Physically, I feel fine. Mentally, I'm quite fatigued. One of the things that I try and do is when I'm feeling well, I'll think about this version of myself and do something kind for it. So I do a lot of batch cooking because I know that the first thing that goes is my diet. When I'm particularly tired, I crave sugar, I look for carbs. And actually what I need is like some veggies and some good food and to look after myself. And so I'll batch cook so I can just heat something up really easily, still prioritize looking after myself, but make it simple and straightforward so that I'm not exerting additional energy on doing that. So that's something that I've definitely started doing more now, and it has a real positive impact.
We've got a lot of support coming through in the Q&A for you about batch cooking. So we've got a comment come through from Thomas, woohoo for batch cooking. And yeah, finding these suggestions and ideas really helpful. And I think, it's not until you talk these things through and find out what are other people doing that you can then start having an awareness of, could this be helpful to me or not? You've got some more support coming through the chat. Love batch cooking, which is great.
I recommend Melissa Hemmingsley has written a book all about batch cooking. She's the person that inspired me to do it, and it is great. So
there you go. Fantastic. Mike, what are your thoughts on these three questions? Anything comes to?
Yeah, absolutely. With Emma on the batch cooking one. The one thing that I did a few years ago was switch to decaf coffee, and it was a little bit difficult at first, got to be honest with you. But now it's fantastic because I can drink as much of it as I want and never get dehydrated. Because what I was finding was when I was drinking caffeinated coffee is that not only would you get the headache from the caffeine, but you'd also get this raging thirst. And they say after about 3 cups of caffeinated tea or caffeinated coffee, it becomes diuretic and you start losing hydration from your body. So that one definitely worked for me. It does require a bit of willpower. There's no getting away from it, but it can work, and you can drink as much of the stuff as you want. Or you can have a caffeinated coffee occasionally if you're out, and then come back to decaf for the rest of the day. So
Yeah.
definitely something to look at on the hydration side.
Definitely, Mike, and again, support for you there in the Q&A. Although we have had some comments coming through, could never give up caffeine, and I think it's like anything, isn't it? Going back to that kind of, thinking what's the steps, and like yourself, Mike, I made the decision to reduce my caffeine, and so I have one caffeinated drink a day, and the rest is decaf. And I certainly noticed the difference. So sometimes it's not necessarily about totally restricting, is it? It's actually recognizing within ourselves what's helpful, what's not helpful, and then making the adjustments there as well. So if anyone's thinking about doing that, just thinking it doesn't have to be that all or nothing. It's what works for you. Brilliant. Oh, we've got some suggestions as well. So switching to decaf in the evening or from the afternoon. Hot water and lemon slice. There we go. Lots of suggestions coming through there as well. Great. Okay, so another great resource that's available on our website, and it's something that we focus heavily on in the mental health first aid course, is our stress container. It's a great visualization. It's a great communication tool to really start thinking about our stress. And before we show the animation, I just thought it was really important to talk about how sometimes good things in our lives can cause us stress as well. And I'm sure we'll discuss those as we look at the stress container. So let's have a look at the animation. This is showing how easy it is for life events, and our health can really fill up our stress container. So what have we got in here? We've got things like family, we've got things like bereavement, trauma, health, work, relationships, and money. I'm just wondering if our panelists would want to just explore some of these in more depth and bring this to life.
I'd certainly like to pick up on one. We're in Black History Month, aren't we? In October, and the theme, as I said before, of World Mental Health Day this year is about being in an unequal world, and the world's becoming more unequal, and that is traumatic for lots of people. So people not only who were struggling along on universal credit and facing increased gas bills and so on, but people who are still trying to work out things like the murder of George Floyd, how that relates to them, how that relates to the way they can protect their children. I'm a person in that situation. My daughter stays at school, plays netball. I'm on the phone every 5 minutes. Where are you? Where are you? Give me an update. And I'm, the annoying dad, who won't leave his 17-year-old daughter to go and live her life because I'm concerned. And all these things are quite traumatic. And sometimes we have to unpack that a little bit, be gentle with ourselves and be gentle with each other, knowing that as we talk about stresses, yes, there are great things that cause stresses, having a child and all those wonderful things, but there are also some very negative things, and we need to be very kind to each other and gentle in how we uncover those, peeling that onion.
Yeah, and absolutely, and respecting what people want to share, how much depth they want to share. Absolutely. Emma, what's your thoughts on this?
I think it speaks a bit to what Mike was just sharing, but I wanted to talk about work and the fact that we talk a lot about bringing your whole self to work. And when there are events going on in the outside world that will impact certain marginalised groups, recognising that people bring that experience and those feelings into the workplace, they don't leave them at home. And it's important that we see everybody as a whole person, and we're asking them how they are, and we're checking in with them, even if the experience is different to ours. And I think particularly over the last 18 months, we've been through so much change, whether it's more working from home and we're starting to go back into an office environment. For some people, their jobs may have changed, life could look very different. And I think it's really thinking about the level of change that people can cope with, and what are we doing to check in with each other to see how people are, because at the moment, you know, you can go back into the office as an example, and for some people that's such an amazing thing, and that wouldn't necessarily impact their stress container as it might somebody else who's very nervous about getting transport again and going and being around lots of people, is very nervous about, you know, physical contact. And I think there's something about how are we seeing each other as individuals, not looking through our own frame of reference, and, you know, really checking in to understand the stress containers of others.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, one that really stands out for me, particularly because I work a lot within loss, is bereavement. And what you were saying there, Emma, you know, there is no hard and fast rule around how somebody experiences bereavement. We all experience it different because we're all so unique. And often something that is often overlooked is the anticipated loss that someone may be experiencing. So all of these factors, all of these things can play a part in our stress container. And we have a really another fantastic resource. You're going to get bored of me saying these fantastic resources throughout this session, but we have some really great resources there. There's a lot of thought that has gone into these resources and how they can really help you to formulate these conversations and to reflect. So this one is all around sources of stress. So we've spoken about, there are some really great changes that can happen in our lives, whether that's marriage, whether that's having children, Mike spoke about earlier. So we have these life changes. So that's in the first column. So really thinking about how some of our life changes may be causing us stress right now. We have, you know, the emotional sources of stress. So coping with uncertainty. The physical ones, which we've touched on today, where we've spoken about sleep, diet, batch cooking, another promotion there, and environmental as well. So, you know, I know unfortunately it's difficult to avoid the media, and we will, even if we're not experiencing unemployment, for example, we just hearing about unemployment in the news can be a source of stress as well. So, and then changes at work. So starting a new job, taking on more responsibility or redundancy or fear of it. So this can really help us to start thinking what are our stresses across, and also being able to think about where do they sit within our container. Okay. So what would be really helpful for us to do is then think about how we're going to empty our stress container. So we're just going to share another short animation with you. So looking at how these helpful coping methods can help to empty our stress container. And I was just wondering what our panelists use that are helpful or unhelpful when it comes to managing the stress container.
Well, for me, it's as that middle one there says, you know, it's having a conversation with people. So I was having a conversation with myself. Often I need to talk to myself and say, look, you know, your arthritic leg, your old man, isn't helping you get out today, but you can do exercise indoors. You know, I've got weights. We're encouraged to do strength exercises, aren't we, by the government, as well as aerobic and external exercises. So there's always an option, and I have to kind of tell myself that sometimes. But I also make sure that I talk to, you know, my partner or somebody else on a regular basis. Just, you know, chewing the fat, as they used to say, just open discussion, and then out of that, some of the issues can be raised, and that's how I do it anyway. Hope that's helpful for some.
Thank you, Mike. And I love that analogy, that kind of like chewing the fat. And I think sometimes, you know, laying out first checking in that somebody's okay to have that conversation with you. Are they okay that you want to chew something through? And also, you know, not always feeling like that person has got to provide you with a solution. So kind of setting that expectation can really help. At the beginning is like, I just want to talk something through. There's no expectation from you other than to listen. Can be really, really helpful. Emma, what are your thoughts around hopeful and helpful and unhelpful?
I mean, dog walks are great for me. A long walk, I might start off the walk feeling a certain way, and I'll always feel very differently afterwards. And listening to a podcast, normally somebody who's talking a bit of sense as I go for a walk with Jeff. And I think, I mean, from an unhelpful coping strategy, is if I'm, so from a work perspective, if I'm working on something, constantly going back to it. And I think that's a real challenge that we experience working from home. So I sit at my desk, this is in my lounge. So I log off and I move not very far to a sofa behind me. It's very easy for me to stay connected to what's going on. And so I very actively make sure that I, shut my laptop down and I put it in a different part of the house so that I can't, access emails and I don't have things on my phone. And so it's about making sure that I restrict the ability to quite easily just keep working or keep checking in on something, because it's not productive. I know that I'm not actually doing anything productive by doing that, and it will affect my sleep and etc. So
yeah, so there's definitely something in there around having an awareness of self, isn't there? Having an awareness of, what is helpful. And one of the things, and it, I laugh when I say it, but it really does make a difference. So things for me, when I've got tasks that I really don't want to do, and one of those is washing up, is that I'll change my state by listening to some music that really lifts my mood. So thinking about what really can help us change state and in those kind of short-term things. And then I also know that sort of longer term things, helpful things, are talking something through as well. So it can be a mix, right? We don't have just one thing. As long as we've got many options, that can be really good. We've also got another resource on the website which gives you some suggestions on there. So this can form part of a plan that you want to put together, so maybe trying some new things. So we know that moving helps. Giving ourselves some time to do something fun, having things to look forward to makes such a difference to our mental health and well-being. Learning, coming along and learning today, and other creative things can really help. So this gives you some suggestions, whether this is for yourself or whether you're working with somebody else. So that's available on the website as well. Okay, so it's all very well us practicing this. What we really need to do is that we make sure that we book in the time to do it, making our well-being and mental health a priority. And I don't know if you're like me, if I don't book something in, it's less likely to actually happen. So any tips or advice from our panel around how do we make these MOTs happen for ourselves and supporting others?
I think a colleague of mine from my previous workplace used to meditate whilst brushing her teeth. And I think there's something about combining activities into a current part of your routine to make it easier to embed it. And she did that daily. It was just something, and she would do it twice a day. And I just used to be in awe that she was able to do it, but it's because she just piggybacked it onto something that she had embedded already.
Sounds like a great tip. Mike, would you like to share any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I work most of the time on a freelance basis, and freelance is notorious for very, very long days and not switching off. Very much some of the stuff that Emma was talking about there earlier, closing the laptop. So one of the things I do is I ensure that I adhere to a routine. Come 5 o'clock, even if I'm in the middle of doing something, I will actually go and get changed, physically change my clothes, and that gives me that break. And it's at 5 o'clock, religiously, no matter what I'm in the middle of, even if I'm in a meeting, just say, just got to log out, just got to skip out for a minute. And I'll just go and change. And that gives me that chance to just take off the stresses of the day, physically take it off. And then I come back, and even I might spend another 2 hours in front of the computer, but I know then it's on kind of my terms rather than I've been dragged into it. And that's the sort of routine way that I deal with that.
Brilliant, thank you. Some great examples to share. So a reminder, this everything we've covered today, we've broken down the whole My Whole Self MOT. We've done it as a step-by-step process that you can do, whether that's by yourself or if you want to buddy up with someone. That's also helpful, is kind of having someone to do this with. It's always great having someone that you can ask you some questions and help you to explore as well. So whether that's with a mental health first aider, 2 mental health first aiders, or even a group, you know, you could potentially do that as well. So it's a really great resource. Remember to download it and share it as much as you can. We've also got some other resources that we want to highlight today for you. So the first one is we have got this document which helps us with My Whole Self. So, you know, we know that by bringing your whole self to work, it encourages more creativity, a greater sense of belonging. So there's some support in this resource around how to do that. The second one that we've got is we've also got guidance for mental health first aiders. So you can use this resource to think about what could you be doing, what might you want to introduce. So having a look at that as well. And about a year ago, we developed this next resource, which is all around supporting the mental health of people of colour and Black people. So this is a resource, and we're continuously updating our resources. So we now also have the impact report. Mike, I don't know if you want to add some thoughts around some of the work that we're doing here.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So yeah, as you said, Emma, this is available, this document. It refers to quite a number of historical publications, and Mental Health First Aid England are looking to update this. But what we've done within the organisation, and I'm part of a small group that's doing that, and Armour is the lead of it, is we're looking at how we ask our mental health first aiders to consider discrimination and stigma in the whole. So before we looked about stigma of mental health as a form of discrimination, now we're asking all our mental health first aiders who we train, think a bit more broadly, think a bit more widely. You know, there's perhaps 1,000 people on this call. Everybody's come here from 1,000 different directions, all have 1,000 different journeys. Nobody's the same, are they? And as mental health first aiders, we want to understand people so we can help them better. So we're asking people to look a bit closer at racism and particularly anti-racism, because if we can make our workplaces anti-racist, our societies anti-racist, they'll also be anti-homophobic, they'll also be anti-ableism as well. So definitely have a look at this, whoever you are. If you've got no Black people or people of colour in your close circle, have a look at this and just try and think, well, how can I be part of the solution? How can I be part of something, a movement that's getting better? You know, we're living in an unequal world, and that world is becoming more unequal rather than less. So let's all try and play our part in that. So definitely have a look at this stuff.
Great, thank you, Mike. And we also have access to a great website, which is the Every Mind Matters. I think this is fantastic. You answer a number of questions and it will populate some resources, some suggestions, some tips. So very similar to some of the methods and tips that we've talked about today, but a real personalised question plan for you. So this is great for yourselves or working with others. We also have a whole list of resources and training, and this will come out to you. So as you've registered for this event, this will come out to you. So check these out, you know, share them, have a discussion around them, see how useful they can be in supporting some of the work that you're doing around wellbeing at work. Okay, so before we get to our Q&A part of today's session, what we'd like to do is it would make sense to do a check out, right? So what we want to do is we really just want to check in before you leave around our confidence levels now. So how do you feel now? Now we've broken that down for you. Now we've had a look at that. Let us know what your confidence levels are around checking in on your own mental health, but also checking in on the mental health of a colleague, friend, or family member. I think for me personally, I'm just sat here reflecting and thinking about how many people have joined the session today. And I think that's given me more confidence to reach out. And, you know, it's really powerful, isn't it, when we all come together like this. I think that inspires confidence in me. I don't know about yourself, Emma and Mike.
Yeah, I'd definitely say I feel part of a shared group of people. You know, it's mental health is a societal thing, but it's a very individual thing as well. So it's great that people are taking all this time. I believe we've got almost 1,000 people on the call. You know, that is wonderful, isn't it? That people are taking that time to actually learn about this stuff. And it means that you're in a community, you're likely to be in a community where you're going to meet somebody like that. That can only be good, can't it?
And I think looking at the Q&A and some of the things that people are sharing around what they do and experiences, it shows the importance of like continuing to gather information and try new things, and the fact that you don't need to do things on your own. You don't need to be expected to come up with all of this stuff on your own. There's a wealth of knowledge out there to use.
Yeah, oh, look at that. Isn't that great, hey? So we've got 51% saying very confident, 44 saying somewhat confident, and yeah, we've got the other 3 and 1% there. So I guess I would encourage those people to reach out and you know, practice. We've said this is all about practicing, so the more you do something, generally the better we get at it. So that can also help with our confidence. And when we think about others as well, so we've got very confident 45% and 50% for somewhat confident, which is great. Lovely. Okay. All right. So I've noticed some comments coming through asking around what does an MOT stand for. It actually stands for Ministry of Transport. So this is an annual thing that we would do for our vehicles. So it's this check-in on the health of our vehicles. So it's using that analogy, it's using that idea of doing that regular check-in as to how is our mental health and well-being, just as you would with a vehicle to prevent things from going wrong, right? You know, that's the whole purpose of an MOT is about prevention, and you know, keeping things running as well. Fab. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the questions that we've got coming through. Right, really great question that's come through in our Q&A. So here's one for the panel. So this come through from Michelle, and it says, I know that I'm not good at looking after myself. How do I start? So what are our thoughts on this one? Where do we start?
What a question. What a question. I think going back to what we started with was asking, how are you? Is a really nice way to start, to explore what's going on for you individually and go from there. Because even by just taking that time, that moment can be incredibly impactful.
Yeah, and I think that's make the time first, isn't it? So it's great making the time, asking ourselves those questions. Mike, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I must say, after that little thing we had at the beginning, I'll definitely repeat that. You know, the sit up in your chair and hands flat and feet flat. I think that was great. I would definitely use that. I'll use that in all my training now, Emma, if you don't mind me saying so. I'm going to take that. Yeah, just taking that it just feels like a few seconds, doesn't it? Just ground yourself. Just know how you are, and then you can move on from there. It's when people are caught in a turmoil, I think, a bit unsure which way to turn. That's when some of the worst situations can occur. So start with the place and start with yourself, and just get that grounded and then move.
Thank you, Mike. And there's a comment come through in the Q&A, which is just so lovely. So James Boyd has said, I don't want to lose it, it's like jumping up the screen, but James Boyd has said, you are here, you have already started. How fantastic is that? You know, we actually, by doing things like today, sometimes we don't even realize the stuff that we're doing, we have already started. So some great stuff there. Okay, so what else have we got? So we've got Okay, so we've got Karen. So we've got a question that's come in from Karen. How do I manage my mental health when it's being impacted so much by others? So family, partner, children, work colleagues. Yeah, so I want help, but sometimes I feel like I need to protect myself. Is this boundary setting? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, that's a common thing these days. There's so many environmental factors playing a part in our lives. You know, COVID is just one, isn't it? You know, anti-racism and all these other things, all these other health scares. You know, with the viruses coming up. What I'd like to do is to suggest people do that stress container activity. You know, it's freely available on the website, and write down what your stresses are and sort of separate them out a bit, because you know, it's hard to sort of, you know, it's hard to eat the whole elephant, isn't it? So break things down, and if you like, attack, if you don't mind using that term, or deal with, challenge each one at a time. You know, just start with the ones that you can do something about, and then, you know, over time you'll develop the abilities, if you like, to deal with the others. That's how I would sort of approach that, and I think the stress container gives you that opportunity. But identify the stresses first.
Yeah, definitely. And yes, okay. So we're just thinking about that analogy of you can't pour from an empty cup. So really thinking about how we're going to look after ourselves, and also thinking, what do we need from others. This is something that I'm continuously working on, is, you know, asking for help and being really specific. I just get really frustrated. But then I realized I wasn't being really specific about what help and support I needed. Yeah, so it, you know, really thinking about what would make a difference, what would help me right now, and how can I communicate that in the best possible way. Okay, so I'm conscious we're coming to the end of the session, so we've got another question that's come through, which this one's from Jade. So is there any resource on in different faiths and religions, so we can have a better understanding of supporting individuals from different faiths and religions?
We don't have a specific resource on that on the website. And Mike, from your experience as an instructor, I'm sure there's lots of things. The first thing that comes to mind is around frame of reference and using that as an opportunity to support others and explore needs. Is there anything, Mike, from your experience instructing, that has worked thinking about faith and religion and the relationship with mental health?
Yeah, it will vary between religions. Most religions would have a pastoral view of mental health, and that usually is very positive. I've yet to come across any that are anything but positive. It's locating them, and that is the issue. Often imams, pastors, priests, you know, that have trouble actually accessing that material themselves. And of course, a lot of the religions, people are on a voluntary basis in positions of leadership, even within local expressions of faith. So, you know, very often it's doing a bit of research almost on behalf of your minister, your priest, and so on. But their information is there. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there. It will need finding, though. It's often not easy to find. I often find bookshops a good place. So I went to a Church of England bookshop in London, for instance, and there was a section on mental health, you know, and so I just picked up some books and started from there, and then networked, got into contact with people through social media, and sort of just developed a small network of people. And then as you look and as you ask, more people come forward and go, oh yeah, I was thinking of that just the other day, and we had this initiative going and that initiative going. So there's stuff there, and people want to help, because every religion has a pastoral side to it, a need to support people. It's just difficult to locate it on a quick internet search. You do have to do some digging.
Brilliant. And I like that idea of, you know, developing our resources, developing our toolkit. It's definitely something that I think, you know, is a continuous thing, isn't it? which just brings me to another question. I'm just going to squeeze another one in. another question in. So we've got Karina asking, where do I find support for myself to help support my child with her mental health and well-being, which, you know, is a really difficult situation to be in as a parent. And I personally have referred to Young Minds website. There's some great resources. Again, if you're building your resources toolkit, Young Minds is a great one to add. Any other thoughts from our panelists around this one?
Just from myself, when my daughter was able to access some counselling via a combination of her school and local faith community, and that was very helpful when she needed help. But Young Minds is really good. Young Minds is really good for parents as well. I highly recommend all parents to have a look at it. But there is stuff out there. Just once again, it's finding it.
I think in terms of having a conversation perspective, if you're a mental health first aider, LG is a great model to be able to use with young people, your own children. And we have a youth version that applies to that. But if you're skilled up to be able to use it, there's no reason why that might not help support the conversations that you're having. And I think the fact that you've noticed it and you're seeking to find the right way to offer that support is almost one of the bigger hurdles to overcome. So it's really great to hear that. And thank you for sharing that with us. So yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, well, just want to say, thank you for everyone for attending today. We have had a huge number of questions and responses, so we apologise if we haven't been able to answer or respond to them all today. The good news is that we will be sharing the recording of this session and the slides for all of our attendees. So thank you so much, and take care of yourselves. Book that MOT in, and happy Mental Health Awareness Day for Sunday. Thanks to our panelists as well.